Anyone that's been in the firearms industry knows the challenges that it can be in terms of credit card processing. They know that credit cards can shut you down without notice. They may consider this a high risk category. In today's episode, we're going to dive in with Adam, who's the CEO of TacticalPay, to get a little bit more information about credit card processing, what it is, how it works, and what makes it unique and particular in the firearms industry. So, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tony, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on. You could just start from the top with people that aren't familiar with it. What exactly is a credit card processor? What do they do? How do they operate? Just give us a high level overview, and then we can dive into the specifics in the firearms industry.
Sure. So, a credit card processor like Tactical Pay or some of the other ones that are out there, essentially, really operate behind the scenes. When you have a customer that is purchasing a product or a service from you, whether that's e-commerce through a website or in-person retail, a credit card processor is going to essentially grab those funds from the merchant's customer's credit card or debit card, and we facilitate the funds transfer of, getting the funds from their account, clearing them, and then depositing them into the merchant's account.
Got it. So there's a lot of things happening, obviously, behind the scenes. Now, is that only for online credit card payments, or is that online, in person, or both?
So really both. So there's kind of really three that we kind of break it down. So retail, which is you'll probably hear me use this term later in the show, is a card present, meaning you've got actually a physical card. It's going into a terminal or a card reader, and then you have mail or telephone orders, which is, hey, you're calling the business, and you're giving them your credit card information, your full credit card number, expiration date, billing zip code, CV code, all that's done over the phone. And
Got
then
it.
the last piece is e-commerce, and that's kind of what we're all familiar with. Going on to Amazon, going on to clothing stores website, filling up your shopping cart, and then checking out right there on their website, and really kind of having no, very limited interaction with another human being. It's all kind of done right there on the website. And in those last two examples, Moto, mail, telephone order, or e-commerce, those are what we consider to be card not present transactions.
Got it. So why, I'm sure there's a ton of credit card processors in the industry. Why Tactical Pay? Why Firearms? Why does there need to be a credit card processor that focuses sort of on this niche in the firearms industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say that, firearms are kind of considered, at least if it's a full firearm that can be fired,
Sure.
that is in our industry considered to be high risk.
Right.
There's a number of reasons around that. Regulatory requirements. There could be legal and reputational risks. There could be some supply chain issues downstream. If a merchant is getting their product from countries that are currently under, some form of embargo,
Mm.
then, I would say not a huge issue, but sometimes there's a little bit of a lack of transparency in the industry. And then, just the overall conversation that's going on around firearms,
Sure.
specifically in the United States, that's given a lot of these bigger banks just kind of some trepidation in terms of working with these businesses, and
Right.
we kind of hear some horror stories from our new customers that are looking to make a change because they had previously had processing kind of with these bigger companies, more household names, and where they kind of get shut down. Sometimes their funds are withheld for, a significant period of time. So that's kind of why we created tactical payments, because we know that, really, if you get down to the nuts and bolts of these businesses, they are good businesses. They're following the letter of the law when it comes to, federal, state and local regulations.
Sure.
So really what we were trying to do is provide these businesses with an avenue to get credit card processing at comparable and competitive rates, but they don't really have to worry about their processor or their underlying bank um, really just kind of arbitrarily saying, "Hey, I'm out. We don't want to work with these types of businesses anymore." So
Yeah.
the banks that we work with, they fully understand these types of businesses and are comfortable with them, and aren't going to make kind of these knee-jerk reputational decisions that kind of leave the firearm businesses in the lurch.
Yeah, I guess 2 points to spin off there. You mentioned the word high risk, and when we say firearms industry, I kind of think of it as two possible pieces. There's the brands that actually sell firearms specifically, and then there's other companies that sell firearms related items. So, say a holster brand, or somebody that sells gun safes, or scopes or magazines, something like that that doesn't actually fire a gun. I've heard, stories of they also being considered high risk as well. Is that actually the case, that they could get lumped in and possibly, treated in that same category, and tactical pay could possibly be a solution for those businesses as well?
Absolutely. So, anything kind of in the accessory, the realm, tactical pay does not really consider those to be high risk.
Sure.
But to your point, if you're, kind of with those bigger banks and they kind of make those knee-jerk reactions, a lot of times we see that the accessory businesses will kind of get lumped into it, in my opinion, rather unfairly.
Sure.
So that's kind of, with that at tactical pay, we kind of, well, not kind of, we really do all the due diligence up front to make sure that we fully understand the business, that our banks understand the business, and therefore, there's not really that propensity for these, out of the blue terminations or funds being held.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that and kind of touched on it a couple of times. There's the payment processors like, Stripe or Square, or some of those that we're all familiar with. That if you own a bakery, in your local town, you might want to set up one of those. But we've heard stories of firearms related businesses getting initially set up with those and possibly dropped after the fact, and the customers' funds are essentially held. Is that actually the case? Do you see that happening? And I can only imagine, if so, how detrimental it'd be to the business that's impacted by it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do see it happening, and I don't want to talk, excuse me, ill of Square and Stripe. They just have, what I would consider a different business model, right? These companies auto approve merchants to kind of keep up with the latest trend in the payment space, which is, hey, we're going to get you you're going to fill out this form, and you're going to be able to start processing credit cards as soon as you fill out the form.
Sure.
But what they're really, and they kind of call those auto approvals or instant approvals. But what really happens on the back end is that they'll start to really underwrite and try and understand those businesses, 15, 30, 45 days out. Um, and if anything is off, or if, they feel like it's too close to, to a product that actually fires or detonates or what have you,
Sure.
just because, way their website might be presented, you know, very arbitrary things in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
But every company has their own kind of risk tolerance. Um, so what they'll do is they'll just terminate the account rather than fix the issue, because they're so large and they've got all of these reputational risks that could continue um, to allow potentially harmful merchants process. So what you see is a lot of the good guys kind of get swept up in these processors, trying to make sure that every account kind of fits their mold.
Yeah. And I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this has been in the news quite a bit lately with, I think I saw a snippet on a new SIC code that was being created specifically for gun manufacturers. Maybe elaborate, if you could, on why that's, what that is exactly and why that's something to sort of pay attention to.
Sure. So I can't remember exactly when it was released or when it was you know kind of released out there into the market, but the card brands Visa and MasterCard did create a new SIC or MCC code that is specific to firearms and firearms only. That has, for the most part, been put on hold. There's a lot of speculation as to the real reason, but for the most part, given my experience, it seems like it's purely legislative reasons at this point. I think there's a lot of concern of these credit card processors tracking gun sales,
Mm-hmm.
which, in my opinion, you really can't, because really all you're doing is saying, hey, this business sells guns or firearms, as opposed to what you're typically seeing today is this company is a sporting goods company.
Sure.
So, I don't really know what's going to happen with it. We really haven't heard any news about that new SIC code or MCC code
Sure.
since about March. But my own personal opinion is that we will see that rollout. But like I said, it could be
Yep.
this year, next year, or the year after before that really comes to fruition.
Gotcha. So maybe you could talk about, just how it works, the setup process, the approval process with Tactical Pay. Say I'm a merchant, and well, maybe before you do that, what's sort of the ideal customer profile for you, or the range of customers that Tactical Pay might be a good fit for, and then from there we can segue into like what the process is for getting up and running.
Sure. I would say that really any business that is selling firearms that can fire, explode, suppress in any way, any type of firearms or components that do that
Sure.
are a perfect fit. And really, I kind of say um, that really any business that's doing on average more than $5,000 a month um, can experience some significant cost savings, from a couple of the companies that we've mentioned in the past, whether it be, or previously in this conversation, whether it be Square or Stripe. They work on what's called a flat rate model in the industry. And if you really kind of break down the nuts and bolts and do the math, $5,000 is about the nexus point where, if you're doing that consistently on a monthly basis, you can experience some cost savings from those other companies. As far as the types of businesses, I mean, it really runs the gamut. We've got, you small local mom and pop stores, all the way up to some really big names in the industry that we do the credit card processing for.
Sure. And I guess to maybe dig a little bit deeper there, you mentioned sort of the 5,000 as being the monetary threshold where it start. Maybe there's some cost savings there. Is there sort of an upper limit where maybe it just gets too complex, or does it sort of scale infinitely with the service that you have?
I would say that it scales. There's really kind of no maximum.
Right. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And then, in terms of like, platforms that you guys integrate with or that you're fit for, say you're a mom and pop that has, I don't know, a Squarespace site or a Shopify store or WooCommerce, or, maybe you're selling on Gunbroker, like where are, I guess, what do you guys integrate with, or in terms of a web interface, if that makes sense?
Sure. So there's a lot of web shopping carts out there. I probably couldn't name them all, but
Sure.
we definitely can integrate. I have certainly come across integrations that are a little bit more complex, but we can certainly integrate with really anyone. and especially kind of some of your larger ones, whether it be Squarespace, Shopify, Wix, Gunbroker is a big one. You know, we really don't have any concerns on in terms of integrating. Again, like I said, some of them are easier than others,
Right. Definitely.
but we've got a good support staff that's able to help walk these customers through getting their website integrated with the merchant account.
That makes sense. So customer comes to you, let's say they've, I don't know, had a business that got up and running, they're selling, they had some problems with their existing processor, they come knock on your door and say, I want to work with you. Maybe walk through briefly what that process looks like and getting set up and getting up and running, and how long it takes to due diligence, just so people have a little bit of an understanding of what they're walking into.
Yep, absolutely. So for every merchant account, we need a minimum of a valid government ID, whether it be driver's license, passport, etc. We typically try and get 3 months business bank statement so we can really try to understand the financial picture behind the business. And then we'll also like to, if you've had previous processing, we like to take a look at those statements as well, because again, it kind of gives us that more complete picture of the business, and allows us to be a little bit more flexible in underwriting terms in terms of, hey, how much can you potentially process to start out, and what's an appropriate high ticket, excuse me, for your business.
Sure.
Um, then obviously, if, as I mentioned a few times, we do need an FFL if anything is being sold that fires, explodes, or detonates or suppresses. Those are kind of the easy way to explain on when we actually need an FFL.
Yep.
And then if there's any NFA documents like the special occupancy tax 1, 2, or 3, if your business kind of falls under those requirements, we'll need to see those documents as well. And then typically we'd like to get just some pictures of, if you have a retail store, pictures of your store, just to confirm that, hey, this is a real business, they're doing what they say they're doing. And then if you're e-commerce, either pictures of your inventory or a fulfillment or distributor agreement. And kind of with all of that, we're able to complete a real package of, hey, this is what this business does, this is what they sell, this is how they're accepting the payments, and really that kind of doing all of that work on the front end is kind of the model that TacticalPay is taken, as opposed to some of the companies we had discussed previously, where they do all of this after the fact, which could potentially, like I have mentioned, kind of leave these merchants in the lurch.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like that due diligence is very onerous. I mean, that any legitimate business has those documents and things you just referenced readily available. So it doesn't sound like it's a particularly difficult process to get.
No, it's very simple, and we've got a good team that can walk everyone through what's needed, what to expect, and then kind of work with them through any issues that they may have or have had.
Sure.
And then as far as timeline, typically for a firearms business, we can get them up and running, and I would say sometimes the same day, but we like to try and under promise and over deliver. So we tried to give a range of 24 to 72 hours.
Yeah, that sounds completely reasonable. That doesn't sound like a super long time frame at all. Couple quick additional questions, and then we'll start to wrap it up. Anybody that's been in either the e-commerce space or retail is probably, unfortunately, familiar with chargebacks. Comes in, they maybe are fraudulent, or maybe they just don't like that, whatever it is. Maybe elaborate on that, and are there any particular uniqueness or unique scenarios or challenges around chargebacks, or industry trends that you see in the firearms industry?
So one of the reasons why I love the firearms industry is, kind of as I alluded to in the beginning of the call. I mean, these are businesses that have gone through the process of obtaining federal licensing. So there's not a huge chargeback risk, especially when it comes to the actual firearms. And the reason for that is anytime you sell a firearm, someone's actually has to go to that store, complete all of the paperwork, so there's really not any of that, oh, I didn't receive my item
Yeah.
thing, because and we do see people try and dispute it. We call that friendly fraud.
Yep.
And really what they're trying to do, especially in this particular case, when there is irrefutable proof that they have picked up the item that they
Definitely.
have purchased, is really they're buying themselves 60 days to not have to pay for it. Problem is it, for businesses like Tactical Pay, is it, and those merchants, it just creates a lot of extra work, right?
Definitely.
You
In the
get that
middle. Yeah.
you get that dispute in immediately, the customer is given a credit until the whole process plays out. You've got to submit your supporting documents, and then once the processor, both us and that customer's bank agree, like, hey, okay, this product was delivered, we're denying the dispute, then all the money gets put back in the account, and everything's good. But I mean, you can see how that creates additional labor considerations for the business, not to mention, while that customer that is doing friendly fraud got a nice 60 days afloat, well, the merchant paid
Yeah.
for that float,
Yeah.
right? So now on the accessory side, that's a little bit different. That's typically, and again, if it's a card present transaction, that's very easy to overcome those types of disputes. But friendly fraud on an e-commerce um, platform, for accessories, you do see a lot more friendly fraud in that area. And really, if we start to see that, we try and work, kind of in tandem with our merchants, to put in proper chargeback mitigation plans, whether that be, at the point of sale on the website, some customer verification, or even back end programs, that can help these merchants lower their dispute ratio, and really be able to fight this friendly fraud on a cost-effective basis.
That makes sense. Makes sense. Great. I think I only have one other question for you before we start to wrap things up. But is there, we mentioned different business types. Is there any difference between the, an e-commerce payment processor or the retail side from your perspective? Anything there, or is it, kind of all the same setup process and everything on the back end?
There's different integration challenges when it comes to a card present, right? It's a completely different system. We need, a terminal that can, that you swipe, insert, or tap your card into. And sometimes that could be married with or be incorporated in a point of sale system.
Sure.
Whereas on the e-commerce side, we've got to look at those integrations into their website, and that could be through a gateway as an intermediary, so that our merchant account can talk with the website. So other than kind of that, what we call in the industry boarding, as far as the initial getting the merchant account set up, all of that is pretty standard between the two. Now, the one thing that you might see, if you're a merchant, is the pricing is a little bit higher on a card not present account, and that's not something that's set by Tactical Pay or really any of the other reputable merchant companies that are out there in the industry. Those are set by Visa and MasterCard. They have different, what are called interchange rates for a card that has been
Presented.
swiped,
Yeah.
chipped, or insert chipped, dipped, what have you. Those interchange rates are lower than a card not present. And that just kind of goes with, hey, the card not present, there's just a little bit more risk, and that in those types of transactions. And that's true really across the board.
That makes sense. Makes sense. Great. Well, this has been fun. It's been educational for me and hopefully for the audience as well. Are there any other parting shots that you have or things that you want to add, that may be beneficial to the listeners?
No, I think you've done a great job in kind of covering everything. I would just say that, our team here in Houston, Texas is really ready, willing, and able and standing by to help anyone in any industry really, but specifically in firearms, obtain a merchant account, have a relationship with that processor, and really someone that kind of partners with you and your business to make sure that the lifeblood of your company, cash flow,
Yep.
is stable, consistent, and doesn't run some of these risks that we've talked about,
Yep.
of having funds held, having to scramble to get a new merchant account, things of that nature.
Makes sense. Great, Adam. I appreciate your time. And if anybody out there needs a new credit card processor, I'm sure we'll point them your way. And it's been enjoyable for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can find us there. And then always you can reach us at tacticalpay.com.
TacticalPay.com. Got it. Thanks so much for your time.
All right, Tony. Thanks.